Welcome to week one of professional engineering practice. This week we're going to look at professions in general and the engineering profession in particular, what constitutes a profession, the types of license that exist, and so on. But to start with, there are a few pre-test questions for you to have a think about.
So what is a profession anyway? Well, fundamentally, it's about making sure that the right people come into them and that if people are doing the wrong things, they have to leave them. They are self-governed. The people who exercise the profession control who comes in and who goes out. So some key aspects of all professions are that they have a mechanism to discipline members who are not meeting the standards, that they're actually funded by the members, that the members manage the profession itself. And typically there's a need for voluntary participation in the profession. In Canada, professional engineering is regulated by province, not by discipline. In Ontario, it is the Professional Engineers Ontario and the Association of Professional Geoscientists of Ontario who regulate this. The voice of engineers outside Canada is provided by Engineers Canada, who is made up of all the professional provincial organisations. The provincial body regulates the practice primarily in two ways. It ensures that engineering tasks are only being performed by people who are licensed engineers, and it disciplines those licensed engineers when they aren't upholding the high standards required of engineering. The provincial bodies have two other responsibilities: to promote awareness of professional engineering and to have a legal authority to act where engineering is not being performed correctly or by non-engineers, and they have that legal authority through the Professional Engineers Act. In order to achieve all this, PEO has a number of committees, those at the board level made up of members that include an executive committee, a committee that looks at the law, the legislation, and a committee that also works with the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, which is its advocacy voice. There are then a number of lower level committees looking at the functioning of the organisation in terms of academic requirements, the experience, disciplinary issues, registration to become an engineer, addressing public complaints, and mediating for excessive fees.
This slide basically provides an overview of all the committees. The board committees, as previously stated, the core functions of the PEO. In addition to that, the legislative committees are the ones that are actually defined within the Professional Engineers Act and are required by statute to exist. Regulated committees are then created within the PEO definition. Appointed committees are committees that people can be appointed to, and the regional committees are, again, organisationally defined. Task forces can be created as needed. They typically have a defined lifetime in order to address specific issues that may or may not result in a longer-term committee or may result in the activity being handed off to one of the existing committees.
So how do you become a professional engineer? You have to be at least 18, you have to be of good character, and you have to meet a number of work and academic requirements, which we'll talk about in detail. Plus, you have to complete a thing called a professional practice exam, which we'll talk about as well. With regard to good character, we'll talk about ethics a bit later on. In terms of academic requirements, the primary mechanism for meeting this is to take an accredited engineering course in Canada. This is what you're doing here at York. If, like me, you were educated outside Canada, that's fine as long as you took your degree in a country that's a signatory of the Washington Accord. Alternatively, you can take a number of technical exams assigned by Professional Engineers Ontario that can prove your academic requirements. In terms of work experience, you have to have 4 years of verifiable experience, of which up to a year can be pre-graduation. A year could also be from a master's degree, for example, and at least 1 year has to have been under a licensed PEng in a Canadian jurisdiction. Work experience is expected to demonstrate your knowledge of applying engineering knowledge to real problems, practical experience of engineering, management and experience or understanding, use of communication skills, and understanding of the social implications. To become a licensed engineer, you also have to take a professional practice exam, which shows that you understand the ethical responsibilities in law of all engineers and the key legal issues that engineers can face during their practice. Final 2 slides on admission. You can join as a student member, which is free. When you've graduated, you can become an engineering intern, which helps you towards the final PEng qualification. If you're licensed in another province, you can transfer your license between provinces through a national mobility agreement. If you're not a Canadian citizen or a landed immigrant, you can apply, you can start the application even before you arrive. And it's worth noting that newcomers to Canada and engineering graduates may be able to get their licensing at no or lower cost through the financial credit program. So what types of engineering license are there? There's the full professional engineer's license. You can get a temporary license in a given province where you're actually home licensed elsewhere. You can also get a provisional license where you've got everything but the 12 months of experience under a Canadian PEng, and a limited license where you're only allowed to work in a certain area of professional engineering. There are also trainee licenses. We talked about the EIT license. You can actually use this designation, although it's not formally a license. But the important thing to note is that only PEngs are actual members of the provincial association. Organizations also need to be licensed. They have to have a certificate for authorization, which requires a PEng to be listed. That PEng has to have a higher standard of experience than just in order to be licensed in the first place. Organizations also have to have liability insurance or explicitly inform every customer that they don't have any and that the customer accepts that. Note, engineering does actually recognize that people may choose to moonlight or work on the side. You can do that, but you'll typically require a C of A in your own right for any activities you're doing as a moonlighter. And we'll talk about the ethical issues around this later on in the course. So that concludes this office mix. However, you're strongly recommended now to make sure you've read chapters 1 and 2 of the Andrews textbook. And you're also pointed to the PEO website where you will find a lot more detail on each of the points discussed.